Well, I might just tell you that what got me started in addictions recovery ministry actually occurred when I was pastor in Larned. But on December the 29th of 2010, I had the funeral service for a young man, 25 years old, Charlie. I won't give you his last name. But I was not prepared for what transpired at that funeral service. What transpired is that people kept coming in and they filled up all the seats. Before long, they came in and were standing there shoulder to shoulder, and the funeral director at the time estimated there must have been 250 people there. It was awesome. It was just unbelievable. Stocking hats and the tattoos, and you get too close to some of them, your sinuses would get cleared up. But it was Charlie's group. It was his buddies. And I'll tell you, I've been a pastor and working in the school system as a para, both in the high school and then in the kindergarten. And I knew we had a drug problem there in Pawnee County, in Larned. But I had no idea the magnitude of it. You know, I'm a preacher's kid that grew up, before all the drug times that we have today. And I was not prepared for that kind of an audience. But while I was sitting there, God poked me in the ribs, and he said, "This is your mission field." And I said, "God, I don't know anything about this. I've never been used drugs. I've never walked down that side of the street. I don't know how I can reach these people." He said, "You can't, but I can. Just trust me." So that began me on the journey of creating a Celebrate Recovery program, Christian 12-step program in Pawnee County. It's struggled, but it's still reaching some people that need to be reached. So when Jerry and my wife and I moved here 5 years ago, we became aware of there's some huge drug problems here as well. And I've seen that in some of the funeral services I've conducted in Stafford recently. But a year ago, we just felt like that it was time to do something here. And 2 years now, I guess it really gets by. And so what makes a real difference for me is that we have the support, of course, of the Trinity Community Church in Hudson, with Wade and Leanne Russell supporting. And she has the right credentials to help you with this. And then with Cam coming alongside to her and her husband, Kenny, to really lead the group. We're seeing some really neat things starting to happen. God is at work. But you know, I think one thing that we often fail to understand is that, and maybe we don't want to understand it, but someone needs to be reaching some of these people that have some severe drug addiction problems or addiction problems of any kind, but particularly substances that are harmful to them. And so that's been kind of our goal. We're seeing that take place on Thursday evenings as we meet weekly. I don't know where it's going to go. I don't know. But I know God does. And we just have to be faithful to what He asks us to do. As I was the interim pastor of the First Baptist Church in Stafford 2 years before, I've been on leave now, but I became aware of the magnitude of the drug problem in Stafford. I had a fellow over there that should know what he's talking about. He lived there all his life. He said he could take me to each of the quadrants in Stafford, and he could show me at least 7 drug houses in each quadrant. Well, 7 times 4 in my math, old math, was 28, okay? That's a lot of drug houses in a community the size of Stafford. I think you could say probably the same thing here. I think you'd be surprised at the magnitude of the problem. And so we're just trying to reach out to people that are hurting, people that the traditional church is kind of overlooked because these people don't go to church, or at least most of them don't. And so we've got to find a way of reaching out to them, developing a program where they can support each other, help each other, and that's what it's all about. So that kind of gives you, I guess, a bird's eye view of why I'm involved with it. And I appreciate people that come alongside like Kim and Kenny and others that are in our leadership group. It takes a community to raise a child, they say, and it takes a community in order to solve some of the problems that we have. So Kim, I'll turn it back to you.
That's good.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's great. First of all, let me just say that in case you didn't know, I think you do, but just as an introduction, we do have cards, and the name of this group is called New Direction, and it is a Christian 12-step program. AA, as most of you probably know, Alcoholics Anonymous, is the original 12-step program. And I want to share that AA and the principles of the 12 steps did not originate with Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. They originated with a group called the Oxford Group, which was organized during the 1920s. It was a Christian group with the desire to develop true disciples of Jesus Christ. They wanted to have the kind of lifestyle that allowed Jesus to be their true Lord and the one who controlled, who was in control of how they acted, the decisions they made, what they said. They just wanted to follow Jesus in the true sense of the word follow. And so it was Bill Wilson who actually went to this group in the early 1930s and picked up on the steps and the principles that they used in their discipleship program. So when he and Dr. Bob started Alcoholics Anonymous, they used many of those principles and tweaked them a little bit for particular reasons in order to start Alcoholics Anonymous. And they don't keep that a secret. In their early literature, they talk about the Oxford Group on occasion. And so, because of that, the 12 steps themselves, you can be assured, and I do have some information on that, but you can be assured that these 12 steps that are used in the 12-step program are Christian, godly steps. They are, in my mind, they are actually steps of discipleship, to be a true disciple, if Jesus is your higher power. And they do use that phrase, higher power, in AA, that some people are uncomfortable with, but they did that in order to help anybody and everybody walk into the program. Y'all probably know, and I certainly know, that people have had negative experiences with Christianity. And so in order to avoid people just not coming at all because they've had a negative experience of some kind, they used the phrase higher power, and they opened the door and said, come on in. Because back in the 1930s, alcoholism was the prevalent, it wasn't the only, but it was the prevalent addiction, and people were dying. They were dying right and left. They didn't have rehab programs. You just got put in a mental institution. And so, if you were fortunate. So, so they use that phrase higher power to keep that door open, and then as people came in, then they had opportunity to hear about the one who really makes a difference. And so we decided for our purposes that we wanted to have a 12-step group that was labeled Christian. There was a reason for that. Everybody who's coming there right now is a Christian, and that's not to say that we would ever shut the door on people who are not, because I fully believe that if you stick around long enough, you'll catch on to the fact that God is the one who is truly the answer to this difficulty and this challenge in so many people's lives. So we are definitely a Christian group. I want to go over this just for your benefit. How many of you have you ever heard the 12 steps?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to read through all of them then if you're familiar with them, but basically they are, the first step is to admit your powerlessness, and that's the biblical principle. I'm going to tell you I'm going to paraphrase the step and then give you the biblical principle, okay? The first step is to admit your powerlessness, which is biblically a recognition of sin and sickness, and I believe that addiction is both sin and sickness. It's sin because you're obviously missing the mark, you're separating yourself from God, from yourself and other people in your life. That's how addiction works. But it's also sickness. It's a soul sickness. It's something that affects the mind and the emotions, and there are reasons for all of that. But step 2 is to believe that there is a power greater than you who can restore you to sanity. Well, that is the biblical principle of believing faith, the kind of faith that truly believes. The third step is turning your will and your life over to the care of God. So that's obviously submission and surrender, biblical principle. Step 4 is the moral inventory of yourself. That's self-examination, biblical principle. Step 5 is to admit to God, yourself, and another human being the exact nature of your wrongs. That's confession. Step 6 is to be ready to have God remove your defects of character, and I call that godly preparation. It's a season of preparation, and God always has a season of preparation for what He wants to do in someone's life. Step 7 is to humbly ask Him to remove your shortcomings, and that's simply the principle of humility. Humility, not humiliation, humility. Steps 8 and 9 have to do with resolving relationship difficulties with other people. Step 8 is to make a list of those you've harmed and become willing to make amends. That's discovering the log in your own eye, if you know what scripture I'm referring to there. Step 9 is about making those direct amends to people, so that's asking for forgiveness. Just one after another. We're talking about biblical, New Testament, Jesus principles. Step 10 is about just what I call a daily heart check. It's taking a personal inventory, continuing to do that, and admitting when you're wrong. Step 11 is about prayer and meditation to improve your conscious contact with God, so it's that continuing relationship with God. That's your power source. If you get away from God, you lose your power. And step 12 is having had a spiritual awakening, you carry the message to others who are suffering, and to practice all of these principles I'm just now talking about in all your affairs. So that's the biblical principle of witnessing, giving witness, and paying it forward. So every one of these steps comes from the heart of God. That's really what I'm trying to say. Every one of the steps was inspired by the Spirit of God. And so we decided to be openly Christian because we wanted to be able to openly talk about Jesus, about the Holy Spirit, and about God the Father, because He is the true answer to all of this. Just to go back to a couple things that Leroy was talking about, addiction is his experience that he was exposed to was largely drug addiction. As you probably all know, there are all types of addiction. Some are worse than others in their ability to harm and destroy, and the amount of time that it takes. So there's all kinds. Let me just read a few. This is something that Leroy had put in the Stafford paper. So I'll just read a paragraph out of that. Addiction does not discriminate. You know, we'd like to think this is just a problem that the poor and underprivileged have. It is not. My dad was an alcoholic and he was a respected businessman for years. My granddaddy was an alcoholic. He was a respected businessman. He was an entrepreneur and started 5 different automotive parts stores all over mid-Kansas. My great-granddad was an alcoholic. He was a farmer and a rancher. My great-great-granddaddy was an alcoholic, and I don't know what he did, but that was back in the mid-1800s. One generation after another, and none of these men were, you know, lay down in the gutter drunk types of alcoholics. But they were addicted nonetheless. All you have to do is look at the entertainment field, you know, just as an example of people who have it all, quote unquote, and they're addicted to something. People who are highly intelligent are often addicted. There seems to be a tie, actually, between addictions and intelligence. Maybe people just think too much, I don't know. But my addiction started, I was abusing my substance by the age of 3, and then by the age of 18, I got into full-blown addiction. Part of it came from choices I made. Part of it was a reaction to the fact that I was in an alcoholic family system. My dad was an alcoholic, and I lived with him. If you live with someone who's addicted, or even have a grandparent who's addicted, let's say your parents are not addicted, but your grandparents were, that kind of dysfunction gets passed down the family, one generation after another, until somebody says, it stops here. It stops here. Somebody has to decide to recover and then do all they can to spread that recovery in the family and then further on down the line as it goes. So those of us in this group have really purpose to do that. But addiction does not discriminate. Did you have something to say? Okay. I will let you. It affects people everywhere, regardless of economic status, social status, educational level, skin color, or cultural background. The substance or behavior doesn't matter. It may be alcohol, pornography, food binging, illegal drugs, legal drugs, gambling, the need to be in control, prescription drugs, abusive anger, internet games, Facebook, or any number of things even work. So my belief, and what I've seen over and over again, is that people have things that they turn to for comfort, for support, for escape, for pain relief, whether it's emotional relief, sometimes it's physical pain. We have things that we turn to. Can everybody agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Some of those things are, they're okay, it's not a big deal. Sometimes I will turn a movie on, a particular movie, specifically because that particular movie just makes me feel good. It's a feel-good movie. And if I'm, just had a bad day and I just need some escape, I might turn that movie on and it makes me feel good and I go to bed happy. Is that an addiction? No, but it could be, if you did it every day for the wrong reasons. But people turn to things other than God to fill that void, to kill pain, whether it's emotional, mental, or physical, or spiritual. We turn to something other than God, and that's what addiction is about. Addiction is turning to something other than God to fill a void that only God can fill. And that's why it's lethal. Because then you totally separate yourself, you're not going to God in the first place, and then you even make the void and the chasm farther between you and God as you get in further and further into the addiction. Because it's sin and it's sickness, and the sin separates you from God, and you have no power source. So it's deadly. And it's a bad, that's not even an appropriate word, the totally destructive cycle that I believe, and we've seen many cases of this and certainly heard about them, I don't believe addiction can be arrested by any means other than the power of God. The unfortunate fact is that rehabs these days have stopped using 12-step. They've stopped the spiritual approach to addiction recovery and gone to cognitive behavioral therapy. Well, that's not a bad thing, but it is not what helps people turn their lives around and learn how to live a new lifestyle. That can help, but if you don't have the power of God, I don't know of anybody who's made it without the power of God. There's a line in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that talks about alcoholism and any addiction being cunning, baffling, and powerful. And it is. That's why it takes God to get on top of it. So, New Direction, our group, and by the way, I do have several of these cards if anybody wants one, is a support group for those who want to find a new way of life. Because addiction is not just quitting using a substance. Addiction covers every area of your life: spirit, soul, and body, mind, will, and emotion. You have to change your life with the help of God and the other people who are there to support you to learn how to live life in a way that works. Because people who are addicted are living life in a way that doesn't work. It doesn't work. The level of that dysfunction may be large or it may be small, but in some way it is not working. So we use the principles of the 12 steps from Alcoholics Anonymous, and we have a specific higher power. His name is Jesus. If your life is going in the wrong direction, come find new direction through the power of God and a community of caring individuals. Participation is completely anonymous, and that's important, and there are no dues or fees. What you'll find is people who care, wisdom for life, laughter that lifts your heart, and freedom. And that was a little advertisement that's been put in the Stafford paper.
You'll never hear us give names of anyone, but I want to tell you, one man in our group began shooting dope at 16. He's now 40. He just recently had 23 of his teeth, all of his teeth that he had were extracted because of the toxicity that he had, and had dentures in place. And I saw him suffer through that ordeal. I just can't imagine. I can't imagine the pain and everything that he went through. But he is a real dynamo for God being the higher power. Transformed lives do matter.
Yes.
And you know, if you look at the scriptures in Jesus' earthly ministry, he was a friend of sinners. He didn't just hobnob with the ones that went to church or in the synagogue. In fact, they were the ones that caused him the most problem. But he was always out there healing people from various things. And he was a friend of sinners. And what I've seen through these programs is it takes a transformed life to really make a difference. And it does make a difference. They know who various individuals are that they've been buying drugs from or that they've had an association with. And so they are real effective witnesses to what God can do to change their lives. And so I'm excited about what's happening within our group. It's taking some time. We see it increasing each week. We can't do it in our own strength. We just can't do it. But I can tell you, we have some problems here that throughout the county that we really need to see addressed. I've learned through the process that these people care about their families. They care about their kids. They care about people within their household. You might think they don't, but they do. they're human just like what we are. But somehow they got on the wrong track. Someone's going to have to help them get back on the right track. And so that's what we try to do. And we can't do it in and of ourselves. But it's really it's been a miracle changer in the lives of some people. We're going to see more of that, I think, within our group in the near future. It may take longer than we think. We don't know.
Or not.
Yeah, yeah. But it's an exciting ministry. It's one that I would have never thought about on my own. You know, when I grew up, you can tell by the color of my hair that when I grew up, I was, well, we never had any drug problems to speak of. We didn't even when I was growing up and through grade school and high school. Yeah, we had a drug problem. I was drugged to church Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday night, and revival meetings twice a year at least. That's the only drug problem I had, was being drugged around in church. But that's not the kind of drug problem we're talking about we've got today. And it's huge. And it's difficult. It's difficult to make some changes that we need to see made in our community. But some of us are dedicated enough to try to do what we can to help. And that's what it's all about. I've grown to appreciate some of these fellows in our group like brothers.